Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. I am so excited. December is here. Christmas season is here. As you can see, I am slowly decorating for Christmas. I have to get my winter foliage and fake tree branches out of storage, but I am starting the decorations. I'm very, very, very excited. And we are here because November 2021 is over and I want to talk about my wrap up. I only got through 6 books this month. I really tried to get through 7, but didn't quite make the cut with that last book. So that will be in my December wrap up. But I did get through, I guess, 4 full-length novels and 2 kind of novellas. I don't know. There's one that's under 100 pages. Everything else is over. So I never remember if that counts as a novella or not, if it's slightly over 100 pages. But whatever. I got through a lot of books. I had some highs. I had some lows. I had some very angry moments with some books. And I really, really want to chat about them. As always, my channel is primarily horror and thriller. So most of my wrap-ups are going to focus on horror and thriller. Today we got a lot of gothic books in here. A lot of gothic slow burn stories, and normally I love my gothic stories, but ooh, I feel some weird ways about some of these. So let's dive right on in. So first up is this beautiful, beautiful cover. This is Inheriting Her Ghost by S.H. Cooper. I read this as a buddy read, collaboration with my friend Black Acre Doe. We did little video reviews together on this book. This was an interesting one. I'm going to read the back for you guys really quick. So it says, inheritance often comes with strings attached, but rarely are they as tangled as those hanging over High Hearth. When Eudora Fellows learns she's the sole heir of her estranged great-aunt's seaside manor, she believes it will be the peaceful escape she's longed for. What awaits, however, is a dark legacy, shrouded in half a century of secrets, and it doesn't take long before Eudora realizes she's not the only one to call High Hearth home. So this was a 4-star read for me. I really liked the gothic tone of this. I thought S.H. Cooper's prose was really beautiful and very loyal to the traditional late 1800s, early 1900s gothic horror style. This is a very well thought out ghost story. However, I will say the first half was far superior to the second half. Setting up the atmosphere and the main character in this story was done flawlessly, but when the kind of climax of being in the haunted mansion happened, everything felt very, very sped up and rushed. So when it finally got to the end, I was left wanting a lot more from this novel. I feel like I don't necessarily know if this is her first release. I don't believe it is. But I did love the premise and the concept of this. It is very gothic. It is very atmospheric. It is very dark. It is very much a slow burn as well. But I do wish it had been more of a full-length story. It's only about 145 pages. And I think it would have benefited significantly if it had been maybe an extra 100 to really flesh out the backstory of our ghosts, the backstory of the manor, and to kind of really play up into a lot of the characters that were introduced in the second half of the story. But I would definitely love to read something else from S.H. Cooper, especially if it's something in the gothic tradition. I think this was handled so beautifully, and it was so, so true to the essence of a gothic story, and didn't fully go for that kind of new wave modern, cinematic rush at the end. While the story did feel rushed, it didn't feel over the top and bizarre. Mexican Gothic does that a little bit, and there's a book I'm going to talk about in a little bit that does that to an extreme. But I thought this was a very, very good start for somebody wanting to write in the Gothic tradition. Okay, next up, this is Savage Mountain by John Quick. I got this in a recent Nightworms package. I was very, very excited to read this book. So it says, Amy and her friends just want to do a little whitewater rafting in the Smoky Mountains. When her jealous boyfriend decides to try and make their amateur guide look foolish, they end up stranded along the banks of the Pigeon River. While searching for help, they run across a group of men growing for the cartels, men who have no intention of letting them escape with their lives. So this was more on the extreme horror side of stories, and I guess I should have been a little bit more prepared for it. From the very, very beginning, The author cites Deliverance as well as Eli Roth as heavy influences. His characters talk heavily about those characters, or about those films. And God, this is hard to, this is a very well written story. This was a 3-star read from me. Had it not featured assault and violence against women, I feel like I would have given it the 4-star rating, but I really dislike reading about assault and violence towards women, especially if it's of like a sexual nature. I think that's gross, and I think it's very cheap horror. And if it doesn't really do anything to further a character arc or a story, and I will talk about a book that actually does something similar in a moment, effectively, then I don't really think it's worth including. This was all just for shock value. Like, John Quick definitely wrote some really brutal scenes that were very uncomfortable for me to read and felt very inappropriate for the shock and horror value. They didn't add anything to the character development, the plot development, like hidden message in the story that would have justified having it in there. It was just for shock value. And that really took me out of the story, because I can deal with body horror if I need to, but any kind of like the Saw movie, kind of like torture porn fad, that I can't get behind. That just really upsets me. And again, I don't think it is, I think it's cheap horror. I don't think it's well-crafted horror. I think it's lazy horror writing for the sake of shock value. But I will say that apart from that, this was very well written, very captivating. I don't think I liked any of the characters at all, maybe the guide, but I was really invested in reading about them and seeing what happened to them. And John Quick made you care about a lot of these characters in the way that you kind of care about characters in like slasher films, where like, you know they're probably all gonna die, but you want to see how and why. And I thought this is a book I will never read again, but I will probably pick up something by John Quick again, because I did really enjoy his storytelling, the style of writing, his character development. I thought it was very well done. He just writes a type of horror that I don't particularly like. If you like extreme horror, if that's your thing, go for this book. This book would have gotten a 4-star rating from me if it hadn't had some of those more unnecessarily gruesome scenes. All right, book number 3 was The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. This book was recommended to me by so many people. This was a very interesting one for me. I had a lot of feelings reading it and digesting it afterwards. I'm going to read the inside of the book for you very quickly. In the lands of Bethel, where the prophet's word is law, Emmanuel Moore's very existence is blasphemy. Her mother's union with an outsider of a different race cast her once proud family into disgrace. So Emmanuel does her best to worship the Father, follow holy protocol, and lead a life of submission, devotion, and absolute conformity, like all the other women in the settlement. But a mishap lures her into the forbidden dark woods surrounding Bethel, where the first prophet once chased and killed 4 powerful witches. Their spirits are still lurking there, and they bestow a gift on Emmanuel, the journal of her dead mother, who Emmanuel is shocked to learn once sought sanctuary in the wood. Fascinated by the secrets in the diary, Emmanuel finds herself struggling to understand how her mother could have consorted with the witches. But when she begins to learn grim truths about the church and its history, she realizes the true threat to Bethel is its own darkness, and she starts to understand that if Bethel is to change, it must begin with her. So I thought this book was going to be like a puritanical 1600s kind of witch hunt story, and it's not, like, at all. This isn't even like on Earth, I don't think. This is 100% like a dark fantasy story. Fantasy not really my thing. And it kind of has a YA tone to it. Again, YA not really my thing. It is heavily rooted in a romance. Again, romance not really my thing. So I really went into this thinking it was going to be a very witchy, like puritanical horror story, critiquing religion. It is a dark fantasy, borderline YA romance novel with some scary imagery that criticizes religion. So this is a 4-star read for me, because once I accepted the fact that this wasn't a horror story, this wasn't really a witch story, I did enjoy the story. I liked Emmanuel as a character. I really liked her love interest. What was his name? Ezra. I really liked Ezra. I thought he was a really cool character. And I kind of liked the world that was being built in this. I have a whole video where I really dissect this book, so I won't go too much into it. The world needed more fleshing out. I think it would have benefited more had it just been set in like the 1600s, like somewhere. And I liked a lot of like the glimpses we got into witchcraft. I really wish that the author had just dove right in, was like, witchcraft, this is what it is, this is how it works, and now we're just gonna do it. But instead it was more of like an origin story for her and how she may become a witch. I really don't know. So I don't know. This is not horror, this is not really witchy, but it is a dark fantasy novel, and I enjoyed it for what it was. Disappointed me for not being what it seemed marketed as. If dark fantasy is your thing, read this. Again, it has some horror imagery in it that's pretty cool. The 4 witches that are mentioned throughout the story are really creepy looking, and like props to that. I would love to see them on film. I bet they would look really cool. But yeah, this one didn't quite do it for me. But I did still enjoy it. I know in my review video I kind of tear it apart because I was really upset that it wasn't what I wanted. But as a story on its own, like isolated out of my lens of like creepiness, it's a solid book. I understand why so many people like it. Now, what I don't understand why so many people like is The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. I like to say this in a lot of my videos. I'm very opinionated, so if I absolutely hate a book that you love, my opinion doesn't matter. If you love that book, enjoy that book. I'm so glad it worked for you, but this book did not work for me. So this is The Death of Jane Lawrence. This was a 2-star read for me, and again, my rating system's weird. Unless I am forced to read a book that I absolutely hate, I won't give it a 1-star read. I should have DNF'd this book. I really wish I had not read it, but I was very determined to be able to review it and talk about it because it was such a new, hot topic novel. I'm going to read the back of the book. And again, I have a whole angry, ranting review on this, so I'm not going to go too much in this. If you really want to hear me hate on this story, I will have the review linked above. So, practical, unassuming Jane Shoringfield has done the calculations and decided that the most secure path forward is this: a husband in a marriage of convenience who will allow her to remain independent and occupied with meaningful work. Her first choice, the dashing but reclusive Dr. Augustine Lawrence, agrees to her proposal with only one condition: that she must never visit Lindridge Hall, his crumbling family manor outside of town. Yet on their wedding night, an accident strands her at his door, in a pitch-black rainstorm, and she finds him changed. Gone is the bold, courageous surgeon, and in his place is a terrified, paranoid man who cannot tell reality from nightmare and fears Jane is an apparition, come to haunt him. By morning, Augustine is himself again, but Jane knows something is deeply wrong at Lindridge Hall and with the man she has so hastily bound her safety to. And then it goes on to compare the book to a lot of things, but I'm not going to read that because I don't think any of those comparisons are right. This started off very gothic and then became a jumbled steampunk magician mathematical clusterfuck. I could not tell you what happened in this book. I couldn't tell you how the magic works. I couldn't tell you where it's set. I couldn't tell you why they just kind of copy and pasted Great Britain to be like not Great Britain. It's called like Great Beltane or some shit like that. I don't know. And this was just infuriating. It started very gothic and then decided it was a dark fantasy. It decided it was like Harry Potter, sort of. It decided it was steampunk. It was just so all over the place and just bit off from so many different source materials to kind of create this. I mentioned this in my other review, but Caitlin Starling said that she wrote this book over the course of like 5 years and had like multiple different drafts of it and like kept rewriting different parts. And this book reads that like that. Like, I can literally see where she's like, I'm very influenced by Gothic. And now it's like, I just watched Mike Flanagan's Haunting of Hill House and I'm gonna chew off a bunch of that. And then it's like, and now I'm really into like high fantasy and world building. And now I'm really into like sci-fi. And now I want to do steampunk. Like, it is so all over the place. And none of the characters are likable. None of the motivations make sense. Like, the whole point of the story is that Jane marries a man out of convenience, and then something happens to him, and even though they've only known each other for like a week and a half, and he kind of treats her like crap and lies to her a lot, she feels compelled to like risk her life to save his. And it's just like, why? Why? I'm sorry, if I married a man out of convenience and then I found out that he was like lying to me left and right and had a scathing, scary, dark past, I would be like, bye. See you later, man. Not gonna risk my life in multiple different ways, multiple times, to save you. So that was very disappointing. Next up, this was a 4-star read. This is another book I received in a recent Nightworms package. I actually believe this was in my November Nightworms package. And this is Palmetto by Anya Allborn, sorry, which I had never ever heard about before. Let me read the back for you. Kim Devlin nearly has it all. A great marriage, baby on the way. All that's missing is a house. One idyllic enough to fill the Norman Rockwell-shaped spaces in her mind. So when Kim's husband, Eddie, books a property tour of a home Kim has been eyeing online, it's love at first sight. Far too expensive for them to afford, Kim and Eddie make an offer anyway, and score the deal of a lifetime. The house is suddenly theirs, and Kim sees it as destiny. The house is where they're supposed to raise their baby, joyful and free and full of nothing but the best memories. But homes, especially the perfect ones, are never what they seem. Before Kim and Eddie are even moved in, something begins to squirm beneath Kim's skin. Something pretentious, a warning. Don't buy this house. But she ignores her misgivings. As if sensing its mother's foreboding, the baby begins to squirm beneath Kim's skin as well, twisting, writhing. But Kim ignores that too. Blinded by the idea of storybook happiness, Kim barrels headlong into a dream that quickly proves to be anything but unwittingly seals her family's diabolical fate. And it does say that this pays homage to Rosemary's Baby. 100% does. If you like Rosemary's Baby, I've never read the book, but I've seen the film and I love it. You're gonna like this book. I will say, trigger warnings, lots of insects, and there is an animal death in this story. It's not described, but it does happen. It's not one of those things that would make me not want to read a book. I'm very against animal cruelty in stories, and this one doesn't make me want to not read the book because it's off screen, if that makes sense. Like, you don't see it happen, and it's not really described in the book, but it does happen. I loved this. I've never read anything by Anya Allborn before. I read this in one sitting. I just got, Seed by her because I loved this so much. But yeah, very Rosemary's Baby-ish, very creepy. If you've read Switch House by Tim Meyer, it reminds me a lot of Switch House as well. The only reason it's really a 4-star rating, I would say, is because I feel like the ending, it just kind of ends. Like, the ending's not bad, but, like, I feel like it could have been more. Like, there could have been that big sense of dread. Like, the ending of Rosemary's Baby is just so powerful and just, like, layered and built up. And there's multiple scenes at the end of Rosemary's Baby where you're like, that could have ended there. Like, it could have ended, like, when she's like, have you done to its eyes? Like, the film could have ended right there, and it would have been a great film, but they just keep going, like, an extra, like, 10, 15 minutes, and it just makes the film so much better. And this book was missing that, and that was really the only thing I didn't love about this novel. But it was really great. It was an amazing introduction to Anya Allborn. I unfortunately don't know if this is readily available. I know it was a Nightworms exclusive, and I don't know if it's coming out later in the year, but if you did get the Nightworms package, I really, really liked this, and it made me really want to read Anya Allborn's work. Alright, and last but not least was The Chalk Man by C.J. Tudor. I picked this up because, I think it was Baltimortal on Instagram mentioned he was reading this, and then I went and picked it out because I was like, ooh, The Chalk Man, like, I love the Chestnut Man, Jigsaw Man, all the men. And then he ended up, I think, hating it, and I was like, oh man, now I'm, like, even more curious because, like, it's got, like, a pretty high rating on Goodreads, and this ended up being a 5-star read for me. I'm gonna read the back real quick. In 1986, Eddie and his friends are on the verge of adolescence, spending their days biking in search of adventure. The Chalkmen are their secret code, stick figures they draw for one another as hidden messages. But one morning, their friends find a Chalkman leading them to the woods. They follow the message, only to find the dead body of a teenage girl. In 2016, Eddie is nursing a drinking problem and trying to forget his past, until one day he gets a letter containing a Chalkman, the same one he and his friends saw when they found the body. Soon he learns that all his old friends received the same note. When one of them is killed, Eddie realizes that saving himself means figuring out what happened all those years ago. But digging into the past proves more dangerous than he could have known. Because in this town, everyone has secrets. No one is innocent, and some will do anything to bury the truth. So this is at the core of it, a coming-of-age horror story. So automatically love that. I didn't realize that when I first picked this up. It was as I was reading it that I realized that's what it was. I kind of thought it was going to be more of like a serial killer crime investigation thing. It's not. It is a crime story, and it's a very well done one. I will say one of the major flaws with this novel is, unlike The Chestnut Man, where I feel like everything in that story I could 100% believe could happen in reality, this one is you really got to suspend your disbelief. There are so many coincidences just lined up one after the other that make the story work. But kind of in like the Chuck Palahniuk fashion. Like, I don't know if you've read Haunted. I've talked about this a couple times on my channel. But when you read that first chapter of Haunted, you are so immersed in that story and like grossed out and freaked out and disturbed by what's happening that you never ever think about the fact that, oh, that could never actually happen. It's not until you take like that step back after a while and are like, yeah, that was just really good storytelling. It convinced me that something that couldn't happen would happen. That's how this story is. So it's 100% fiction, but if you have that slight suspension of disbelief, this is a really cool and compelling story. Trigger warnings on this. This does have a pretty unfortunate assault on a like 12-year-old boy. It was really disturbing to read, and there is an animal death in this. Again, the animal death is off camera or like not described. You don't see it, you just know what happens. And it's sad, but again, it is used to further the plot and the mystery, and unfortunately, as is the assault. And I think while it's really gross to read, I don't want to say it's unnecessary to the storyline, because I think it helps define a character and it helps define certain motives, and it helps define two characters, both the victim and the perpetrator. And I just think it is a very grotesque and interesting commentary, but it is there, and it is gross, and it is unfortunate to read about. But it didn't make me dislike this book, because I think the way it's handled and what it shows and how it affects the story makes sense. But I really liked this. This is one of those ones where it keeps you guessing consistently. It's another interesting story because everything that happens throughout the whole story, no matter how mundane it seems, comes back to being relevant by the end. There were so many moments where I was like, why am I reading about this? And then I would get to the end and I would be like, oh my God, that's why I read about that. Like, what? And I thought it was just very, very, very well done. CJ Tudor is a woman, which I thought was very interesting, especially because of the way that she depicts that questionable scene I was talking about. And she writes from the perspective of these teenage boys, and I just found it very, very believable. Like, I could see her kind of really channeling like what it would be like to be like a 12-year-old boy in the 80s. And I think that's something that's very hard to do. Grady Hendrix is an author who's very effective with that. He's very good at writing teenage girls in the 80s. Like My Best Friend's Exorcism nails it. And so I thought this was a very, very interesting take, and I really enjoyed it. I love all of the tributes that they pay to it. They really heavily hound you with it tributes, especially kind of it being like the story taking place in like the 80s and like 30 years later, where they're kind of reliving what happened to them as kids. I thought that was really interesting. And there's just a lot of little nods throughout the story that are very reminiscent of it. The one girl character in this group of like 12-year-olds is a redhead who has dealt with like a questionable home life because of her father, and her mom is out of the picture. Like, she's very much like Beverly Marsh in that regard, but at the same time she's also very much not like Beverly Marsh, which I also really liked. So it definitely doesn't shy away from very heavily paying tribute to it, but I never felt like it was really stealing from it. I thought it was a very like self-contained, unique story. And I did kind of like the balance of it being a coming-of-age horror story, but also this kind of like whodunit crime thriller. I wouldn't put it up there with Malignant Summer or December Park or It by any means. Put it more with like Brian Keene's Ghoul. Like, I really appreciated it for what it was, and it really captivated me, and I absolutely enjoyed reading it. But it definitely had some of its flaws, but not enough for me to drop it down to 4 stars. Like, I really, really enjoyed this novel, and I thought the ending was great, and I didn't see it coming. And again, that's where my suspension of disbelief had to come in, because in reality, I just don't believe so many coincidences would line up. But it does take a darker tone. I feel like a lot of times you get more of like a sad ending when it comes to coming of age horror stories. This one is more of like, it focuses on the unraveling of friendships without you realizing it's happening. And I thought that was a very, very unique spin that I haven't seen in coming of age horror. Usually people go their separate ways. This is kind of looking at like, what if you didn't necessarily go your separate ways? It's also got a huge, huge, huge critique on religion and religious figures, like midnight massy without the vampire thing. And I thought it was really fun. And if you're into this type of coming of age horror story, and if you're okay with some of the more problematic scenes in this story, I think you'll really, really enjoy it. So yeah, so that was my wrap up for November of 2021. I have 1 month left. I'm gonna try and get through a lot of winter horror novels this month, and then just like prepare for all of like the amazing releases coming out in 2022. I'm so excited. I'm gonna have my full like most anticipated 2022 books video up at the very beginning of January. So be on the lookout for that. And I will be having a giveaway going up very shortly, probably this week actually, probably Thursday when I post my second video for the month. But yeah, as always, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoy my videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. I post every Monday, Thursday, and sometimes on Saturdays, and I will catch you all in the next one. Mwah.